The gates of Blackwood University loomed high, wrought iron twisting into menacing spirals. Eleanor Hastings adjusted her satchel and stepped onto the cobblestone path leading to the main building. She had accepted the position as a literature professor with excitement, but as she walked past the ivy-covered walls, a strange sense of unease settled in her chest. The stories whispered in hushed tones by students and staff about the haunted halls of Blackwood were meant to be dismissed as mere superstition. But standing before the ancient doors, she wasn't so sure anymore. "Professor Hastings," a voice called from behind. She turned to see a young woman with sharp eyes and a nervous smile. "I'm Clara, the head librarian. I was told to help you settle in." Eleanor smiled, shaking Clara's hand. "That's very kind of you. The university seems historic." Clara hesitated before answering. "It's over 300 years old. There are parts of the building that haven't been touched in decades." She lowered her voice. "And some places that shouldn't be touched at all." That evening, after her introductory lecture, Eleanor wandered the halls, fascinated by the eerie beauty of the place. Candle sconces lined the walls, casting long shadows. She passed a wooden door with a rusted plaque that read, "Room 217. It was slightly ajar. Curiosity got the better of her. She pushed the door open and gasped. Dust coated every surface, and old wooden desks sat in disarray. It looked as though the room had been abandoned mid-lesson. Books lay scattered, chairs were overturned, and a thick scent of mildew lingered. But what sent chills down her spine was the single open notebook on the front desk, its pages impossibly crisp despite the dust. She stepped closer and read the last entry. "She is here, watching, whispering. Do not let her in." A floorboard creaked behind her. Eleanor spun around, heart pounding. The door slammed shut. Eleanor lunged toward the door, gripping the handle with the trembling hands. It wouldn't budge. A whisper, soft and breathy, curled through the room like smoke. "Do not let her in." She spun around, scanning the abandoned classroom. The air had thickened, pressing against her chest. A faint tapping echoed through the silence. Tap, 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 like fingernails against glass. Slowly, Eleanor followed the sound to an old, dust-covered mirror hanging on the far wall. Her reflection stared back, wide-eyed and breathless, but then it blinked. Eleanor hadn't blinked. A slow, chilling smile curled across the reflection's lips, though her own face remained frozen in horror. The whispered voice returned, closer now. "You shouldn't have opened the door." The lights flickered, and the temperature plummeted. Shadows stretched unnaturally, twisting toward her. Desperate, Eleanor fumbled in her pocket for her phone and turned on the flashlight. The reflection's smile widened, teeth stretching too far, too sharp. Just as Eleanor felt something cold brush against the nape of her neck, the door flew open. A force yanked her backward into the hallway. Clara stood there, eyes wide with fear. "What the hell were you doing in there?" Eleanor gasped, her breath coming in short, panicked bursts. The door, it locked. I saw. Clara grabbed her wrist and pulled her away from the room. "You need to stay away from 217. Eleanor resisted. "What is in there?" Clara swallowed hard. "It's not what's in there, it's what wants to get out." Behind them, the door to room 217 creaked open just a sliver. A whisper, like a sigh, slithered through the air. Eleanor's heart pounded as she followed Clara down the dimly lit corridor. The university had always felt old, but now it seemed ancient, like a relic that should have been abandoned long ago. "Tell me what's going on," Eleanor demanded, still feeling the icy grip of room 2's presence. Clara hesitated before whispering, "People disappear here, not just students, professors, janitors, even a security guard. They just vanish, and it always starts in 217. Eleanor stopped walking. "Then why hasn't the room been locked up?" Clara turned, her expression grim. "Because it doesn't matter. The room isn't the problem." She exhaled sharply. "It's the thing that's in it." A chill ran down Eleanor's spine. "The thing in the mirror," she murmured. Clara's face drained of color. "You saw it." Before Eleanor could answer, a loud crash echoed from behind them. The sound of something heavy, something alive, moving across the floor. They turned just in time to see the shadow slithering through the doorway of room 217. Then, the corridor lights flickered violently. Clara grabbed Eleanor's hand. "Run!" They sprinted down the hallway, their footsteps pounding against the cold tile. The whispering returned, growing louder, overlapping voices tangled in desperate pleas. Eleanor chanced a glance over her shoulder. The shadow moved unnaturally, stretching toward them like liquid darkness. Then, something caught her eye. Movement in the glass of the framed portraits lining the hall. The reflection of a girl stood in each one. The same girl. Her mouth stretched open in a silent scream. "Don't look," Clara shouted, yanking Eleanor forward. But it was too late. Eleanor felt something pulling her, like invisible hands grasping her shoulders, dragging her toward the glass. Her own reflection grinned, and then everything went black. Eleanor awoke to an unbearable silence. The air was thick, as if the very walls of the university were holding their breath. She tried to move but found herself paralyzed. A cold surface pressed against her back, smooth, unyielding. She wasn't on the floor. She was inside something. Panic surged through her as she strained to see her surroundings. The darkness felt infinite, but a faint glow illuminated the edges of her vision. A reflection. She was trapped inside a mirror. On the other side, Clara stood motionless, her eyes wide with horror. "Eleanor," she whispered. Eleanor pressed her hands against the glass, but no sound came out. Clara could see her, but she couldn't hear her. A slow, deliberate tapping echoed through the silence. A sound that wasn't coming from Eleanor or Clara. Clara's gaze shifted beyond the mirror, her breath catching in her throat. The girl in the portraits was standing behind her. Clara spun around, but the hallway was empty. The whispering returned, weaving through the air like an unseen current. Eleanor pounded against the glass, screaming, but her voice was swallowed by the void. The girl moved closer. Her face was no longer blurred. It was twisted in agony, her mouth stretching far beyond human limits. With a jolt, Clara turned back to Eleanor. I can get you out," Clara stammered, her hands trembling. "But I need to break the mirror." Eleanor nodded frantically. Clara hesitated. "They say, if you shatter a haunted mirror, whatever's inside." The girl's reflection lunged forward. Clara grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall and, with one final glance at Eleanor, swung with all her strength. The mirror shattered. A deafening scream erupted as shards of glass exploded outward. Eleanor fell forward, gasping for air as the whispering voices howled in protest. When the dust settled, the hallway was still. The portraits were empty. The girl was gone. Clara helped Eleanor to her feet, her hands shaking. "We have to go, now." Without looking back, they ran, past the ruined mirror, past the cursed room, past the halls that whispered their secrets. They never returned to the university again. But somewhere, deep within its walls, a new reflection stirred, waiting